Hello and welcome back to the Odd Shopper YouTube channel. I'm Isaiah, and I'm here to break down this weekend's race at Martinsville. So last weekend, we got some really good news when Christopher Bell came across the line in first. It was quite a sweat. He almost lost that race several times, but that win cashed a 13-2 ticket for us, which after the weekend before that's 13-2 ticket on Kyle Larson makes it 2 outrights in a row for us. More importantly, well, depending on what number you got, our long shot, Todd Gilliland, even scored a top 10 at 10-1. He was competing for the win at odds of 200-1, which is nuts, but he was up there at the front. It was great. Fantastic race weekend. You absolutely love to see it. So did my bankroll. So great stuff. Before we get into the picks, we're going to do a little race preview. I'm also going to talk about Bet365 a little later, and then we're going to talk about Odd Shopper Insider Access, which is the only way to get full live access to my betting cards. Great. So the race preview. We are at Martinsville Speedway in Virginia for the NOCO 400. Martinsville is a half-mile short, flat oval, and there, unlike the Bristol Dirt Race, are a multitude of comparators for it across the Cup Series. So first, we have Bristol and Dover, which are short, banked, concrete ovals. Martinsville is made out of concrete, as are Bristol and Dover. That means that they chew through tires a little bit faster and race differently from the other short tracks on the schedule. However, the other short, flat ovals on the schedule, like Phoenix and Richmond, are still comparators. They just race a little bit differently because of the difference in surface. Those tracks are also a little longer, so I don't think that they're good, raw, pure comparators. They're also a bit more banked, and they bend out in a different way. You can't really see my hands, but those are more like true tri-oval tracks, whereas Martinsville compares more to a paperclip, which gets us to our last comparator, New Hampshire Motor Speedway. Although New Hampshire Motor Speedway is a mile in length, it is also a paperclip track, which means that the corners are hairpins and the straightaways are long. So it's a really useful track to look at when we're thinking about what's going to happen at Martinsville. The other really, really important note for this weekend's race is that there is rain in the forecast in the afternoon. So not only could the rain in the forecast this weekend rain out qualifying, it could also cause some problems for the race. However, unlike most ovals, NASCAR actually has a wet weather package at short tracks that only a few drivers have tested. So the fact that only a few guys have tested should jump out at you. We're going to be looking at those guys on the betting market this weekend for sure. The other headline is that Chase Elliott, despite not being on the initial entry list for the race, which would have been good to know, will be entering this weekend's event. So despite the fact that he wasn't initially entered, he will be returning this weekend. So that's something to keep in mind. Chase Elliott is a fantastic driver on concrete surfaces and should contend for at least a top 5 or a top 10 if he can make it through the whole race after recovering from a broken tibia. Awesome. Before we get into the picks, I want to talk about Bet365. Currently, you can bet $1 and get $200 back in bonus bets. So if you're like me, that means you're playing the biggest moneyline favorite on the day, and you're taking your $1 and hopefully getting it back, and then playing with your $200 in bonus credits on sports like NASCAR. I think that's a great idea. That way you have a much, much smaller risk on your exposure to the race. You can have a much more fun time watching it when you're not worried about actually losing your bankroll. You're just worried about losing some bonus bets that you didn't have originally. Great. Let me pull up the odds board at Bet365 real quick. So our first pick, he's been a mainstay of this video series lately. It's going to be Kyle Larson. Unfortunately, I got my action on Kyle Larson down early in the week before the news that Chase Elliott would return. However, he's trading at a much friendlier price for Larson investors now. Elliott, although he's great on concrete, he may not complete the whole event. He may not run super well. I'm willing to fade him until I see something solid from him. And that could cook us, but that's going to be the risk we're going to take. We're going to fade Chase Elliott this weekend. He will not be on the card. Larson dominated at the other short flat ovals this year. He dominated at Phoenix and he dominated at Richmond, and he had the best driver rating at both events. He almost lost the Richmond race because Daniel Suarez pulled in right in front of him on pit lane and caused him damage. But the important thing is he didn't lose that race. He actually won it. So that's giving me some confidence here. Further, last year's Martinsville Spring winner had a top 5 driver rating in both the Phoenix and Richmond events. And actually, it might have just been one of them. Regardless, Larson was a top 5 driver in driver rating at both. He actually had the best in both events. So that's a pretty big deal for me when it comes to handicapping this year's event. Further, Larson tested the wet weather short track tire in 2021. At where? Martinsville, of course. So I think that gives him a pretty solid advantage. While I don't think that the Cup Series will run the whole race in the rain, I think that they could run a portion of the race in the wet, so although I don't think that means that Larson should dominate because he has the most advantage here and would get run all the way in the rain, I do think that is a meaningful advantage. Further, Larson has run well in the rain in the Cup Series in the past. He was the runner-up at COTA in 2021, which was a notoriously wet race. And then he finished first at Watkins Glen in 2022, event that started on wet tires. He's trading at 7-1 at Bet365, but he's all the way up at 8-1 on DraftKings. So I would just play the number there instead. Perfect. So the rest of this video is going to be a little weird because I don't want a ton of action on the favorites. I do have one more favorite on my betting card that I've shared at OddsShopper Insider Access. But the next guy we're going to talk about is much more of a long shot. It's Chris Buescher. So Buescher won at Bristol last year in a massive upset that I had action on at 125-1, which was great for both me and my bankroll. It was a great weekend. He also finished 8th at Dover last year after starting on the pole. So he's a capable concrete driver. Further, he's an excellent road course racer. Martinsville's hairpin turns and short length reward drivers who can run well at road courses, in my opinion, which is why you've seen some of them put together really impressive runs here in the past. Further, like Kyle Larson, Chris Buescher tested the short track wet weather tire in 2021 here in Martinsville. So I think that should give him a leg up on the field. That means that at odds of 40-1 at Bet365 and 50-1 at BetMGM, I think that he is a screaming value. He could have a decent advantage on the field if they have to start the race in the wet. Even though he doesn't have the most impressive resume at Martinsville specifically, I'm willing to overlook that just to get a little bit of action on him here. I also think he's a decent bet to get a top 10. I think that number should be around 2-1. I would want to get some action on there as well. But before we get into our true ultimate long shot of the weekend, I want to talk about OddsShopper Insider Access. It is the only way you can gain access to all of our betting experts in our premium Discord, and it's the only way you can gain access directly to my betting cards. You get picks in real time, like live bets. You get office hours. You get access to my betting models, especially for the NFL. There is a whole bunch of content available only through that Discord that I strongly recommend you check out. Further, you can get your first week of access for half off, and it's only $19.95 after that. So, in my opinion, just take our bets, make the money you'd be spending on it right back, and then keep paying for it with the money it's making you. It kind of pays for itself. It's a really solid investment. Awesome. That's enough of me shilling that product. I want to talk about our longest long shot of the weekend. It's going to be AJ Allmendinger at 200-1. Now, you may not think this, but AJ Allmendinger, despite his long odds, actually has 2 runner-up finishes in Martinsville in the Cup Series in his career. 2. And yet the books are treating him like he has never run well here before. I think that this race could look very different from previous Martinsville events because of the rain, which should give Allmendinger a leg up because he's an experienced road course racer and sports car racer with experience running on wet weather tires. Further, although Colleague Racing has struggled on short flat ovals in the next gen era, they haven't looked great at Martinsville. They haven't looked great at Phoenix or at Richmond this year either. I don't think there's a driver who stands to benefit more from the potential wet weather scenario than Allmendinger does. And the fact that he already has 2 runner-up finishes in dry Martinsville races suggests to me that this number is far, far, far too long, almost irresponsibly so. I like Allmendinger to get a top 10 as well, and fortunately that number is also trading at quite long of a price. You can get him to at 5-1 at Bet365 just to finish in the top 10, which is a profoundly low bar. If you look at his career results before heading to Colleague Racing, he has a multitude of top 10 finishes. He also has a ton of top 15s. I think he has like 3 or 4 11th place finishes, which kind of skews the numbers on the top 10s. So I am in love with Allmendinger at this price. I really need Colleague Racing to show some life this weekend at a short flat oval, but because they haven't shown any life at all so far, we're getting a bit contrarian, and that means the books are listing him at far too long of a number. So again, Allmendinger is my favorite long shot of the weekend. I still think there's value on Buescher as well. And I have a couple of other guys at much shorter numbers who I think are serious contenders this weekend, especially if the race stays dry. But I've shared those in either the article you can find online or in the OddsShopper Insider Access Discord channel. Great. Let me remove this odds board so we can go through and recap our picks. So first, we have Kyle Larson. He is 7-1 at Bet365. You can find that all the way up at 8-1 on DraftKings. I'm a big fan of that bet. Larson has dominated at short flat ovals this year. I would not be shocked if he does it again. And if it rains, he stands to benefit more than the average driver because of his experience on Martinsville in the wet. Second, Chris Buescher. You can find that at 50 to 1 at BetMGM. Again, stands to benefit a ton from the wet weather situation. Next, AJ Allmendinger, 200 to 1 at Bet365. That's a steal of a deal, although he will probably need some help, maybe in the form of late race cautions, to steal a win here. That number is too long. Also, getting him to score a top 10 should be a sharp play. Please, as always, like and subscribe if you found this content useful. If I've been making you money on the NASCAR Cup Series, I would really appreciate it. It's always great to get more engagement to the traffic, or to our channel. Sorry about that. And as always, it's been a pleasure. I'll see you next weekend, and let's make some money.